But who puts the word to pick David in Samuel's ear? God chose David through Samuel doing the anointing. Okay, we got 2 guys down. That's our lesson kind of 1, wasn't it? All right, lesson 3, we get to old Solomon. And I know the book kept telling us that Solomon was a good king. But boy, I would say that is grading on a curve to the most. To consider him a good king, I think you got to call that grading on the curve. Because he didn't reach the levels of some of the others, I don't think. However, who anointed or who picked Solomon? David. Did God have a hand in that one? Don't really know. God specifically mentions the first 2. David picked Solomon. Bathsheba's urging, exactly. Bathsheba, and it may have been God's direction that he was picked. However, Bathsheba wanted to make sure that Solomon was the one chosen, which also led to the wars and the killings of the brothers and all of that. But from that point on, we have the split. So here goes Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Rehoboam is who? Solomon's son. Who is Jeroboam, though? He wasn't in the right bloodline. He missed the boat on the bloodline side. And God had always said it's going to be through the bloodline of David, right? So Rehoboam is the seed through which the Davidic priesthood is continued. Okay. At that point, I think that was the lesson where Jason split the party up in his lesson. And we just left old Jeroboam and Israel up there. And we went right down the Rehoboam pathway on our pathway to Christ and the Davidic bloodline. All right, when we get there, from that point on, it just seems like it is a transfer along bloodlines. It doesn't seem like there's any intervention as to who is selected next. That the prophets, God, whoever, may have had anything to do with it. We have, in our lessons, we've studied, I think, 14 kings. Of these 14, I'm thinking, hold on. I think it was 8. 8 of these 14 were pretty good guys. 6 weren't worth 2 cents. And I got 4 of them today. But 6 of them were bad. All of these guys had what to follow. They had the high priest to help them, keep them in line. Did they not? That's the role. But there was prophets everywhere, right? Tons of prophets. And I'm skipping all over my lesson. Some of this I had toward the end, some I had in the middle. All right, so with this story going, who was the prophet that dealt with David a lot? Nathan. Nathan kept him, as I used to say, like my mom. When you ran off the road, Mom kicked you back up on the road. When David got off the road, Nathan called his hand on it. Every one of my 4 guys had very, very good prophets. Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Habakkuk, struggling. There's another one or two. Zephaniah and Ezekiel. Did I say him? Anyway, there's like five different prophets that administered to just these four that I have that were available. And you can go back and read in Daniel and some stories about these guys and some of these guys. All right. To see and realize the extent of how bad, let's say, things were, they forsook all of the direction given to them. Because they were continuously being directed because these prophets were calling them out. They were calling them out on all of these things. And instead of getting better or even lightening up the load, it continued to go downhill. Now, let's think about it. Zedekiah is the last king, right? That's right. That's it. He's the last guy. The first guy was Saul. From the time that Moses got the 10 Commandments, the Mosaical age started, to the time that Zedekiah lost control, was like, I think Moses lived like in 1150 BC, 1200 BC. Zedekiah and Malachi actually lived at the same time frame. It was in the 400s. So there had been about 850 years of law that was done by the kings in this time frame. From Moses to Zedekiah's time, it was like 850 years. We have the makings. If you plot each king, and up means good, down means bad, we have a fantastic EKG. It's like this. Good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. We can follow the heartbeat of their morals. One king they're up, and next king they're down. And one time they may not go as high, and another time they may not go quite as low. But it's never up here for any period of time, and it's never down here, and it's never across the middle, it seems, like they just did okay. It's almost always up or down. And you think about it. We have a God, and we use all of these adjectives to describe him. Faithful, loving, kind, then we start on ones forgiving, patient, long-suffering, I don't know if I'd have been so long-suffering at 800 and something years of putting up with what he put up with. 800 years that he was patient with these people. And what had he told them back in Deuteronomy? I love you, and as long as you do what I tell you, we're good. But you don't want to reap the harvest if you don't, right? He done warned them. Before right at the 10 Commandment giving, he had done told them the consequences if you don't follow. We have 800 and something years where they can't keep it on track. God has brought them out of bondage. He's took them through the floods. He's took them through everything that could happen to a human race. He's taken them through it, and they've survived it. But they cannot stay faithful. So, what is he also? Just. He can't tolerate sin. And you finally wore him out. And Zedekiah is the end of it. He destroys, he allows Jerusalem and everything to be destroyed. Now, we enter a period after that called the Dark Ages. However, now we've got a scene set here today where we have 4 guys. And the most amazing, well, I ain't going to say the most amazing. There's some things in this that's just crazy. One, tomorrow, let's just assume that here at Shades Mountain, me and Jim and Rick decide we're going to step down and we're going to appoint Henry Meadows to run the church. He's 8. He's good go. How's that going to go? Please tell me how that's going to go.
It's scary because I was just thinking the very same thing about this kid, the king, right?
Yeah. I mean, think about that. Us 3 are going to resign, and we'll say we're going to let Henry and Everett run the show. They're going to make all the church decisions. But then the next sentence even gets me even more. 8 is pretty bad. Then we're going to say, little Henry did evil in the sight of God. An 8-year-old leading a nation, living evil. They can't even spell evil at that age. Much less know what it is. I mean, what is the age of accountability here? I mean, an 8-year-old king. And I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, if Henry's the elder, me and Jim are going to listen to it because he's our leader. So you know all the folks listened to our 8-year-old king. I mean, it almost seems like a cartoon going on. I mean, how could anybody let that happen? Or are we so intent on carrying that bloodline, but this little 8-year-old ain't going to have nobody to give it to because he's 8 years old. He ain't got no kin. He ain't got no children to pass it on down to. He's only 8 himself. So it's got to go to somebody else that's on the bloodline. So why didn't it go to that person before it went to the 8-year-old? Why did we not skip over him? I mean,
Ronnie, apparently, I don't know if we can get that out of the text here, but supposedly the first one of the brothers chosen was the youngest.
yes, they didn't even pick them in order.
No, that's right.
Yeah, they didn't pick them in order because the oldest one you would have thought would have been first because, you know, we had the birthright thing. You know, all through the Mosaical law, the oldest child, he got double portions, he got blessed, he got everything. So here we give the role to a younger instead of an older one.
This probably actually had to have come from the quote-unquote power behind the throne, right?
Yeah.
There's some folks back here.
Well, it's like, I feel like, you know, these kings, these 4, I wouldn't necessarily say they were outright kings. They were kind of put in that position by the powers to be it Egypt or Babylon or Assyria. They were never actually, let's just say, kings but of their own right. They were more or less selected, and I'm sure they were selected to follow more or less the commands, even to the extent to where one of them paid a talent of gold and 100 talents of silver or something like that. You know, they were paying tributes. And what is a tribute? Tax. That's what it is. They just tax. And the same thing you mentioned in that, during the Dark Ages, that's what caused so many splits between the Maccabees, the Seleucids, and the Hasmoneans that ruled, during the Dark Ages after we get through Malachi. That's what they did. They continuously taxed the Jews to death. I mean, they wore them out with taxes or tributes. I mean, that's, you think they're going to pay you tribute. No, it was taxes, and they taxed everything. But as we go through this, as we went through these lessons, these four guys, each one were basically governors, but one rules 3 months, and it's in it. One rules 3 months, then one rules 11 years, then 3 months, and how long it lasted? 11 more years, right? It was like 3 months, 11, 3, 11. What the pattern is. None of these guys could keep it together long. And what happens to Zedekiah? He's doing what he's supposed to do. In other words, he's following Babylon's rule. But then he decides he don't want to do it no more. So he's going to rebel. Here's a country that has no strength, no military to amount to nothing. But he's rebelled against Babylon. So what does this text say they did? Took his sons, slaughtered them.
That's the last thing he saw, right?
Set him down probably in a nice chair and let him watch him kill all of his boys with a sword. Then plucked his eyes out. So the last thing, that Jim said, last thing he saw was his kids being slaughtered. I mean, that's the kind of guys that we dealt with, brutality and brutality. At this point right here, Zedekiah's reign ends. It's around 420 BC. Malachi, the last book, is in the same time frame as when Malachi writes the book, 420, 450, in that time frame right there. The last king, the nation of Israel's gone. Some people have returned by the benevolence of, which we studied previously in our quarter before quarter, about Cyrus the Great. He allowed some of them to return. You remember in Esther and Ezra's time frame, we allowed a few to return. So there's a remnant of the Jews still hanging together. But most of the Jews now have been dispersed among all of these captive nations. So from the time that Israel's busted up right here, the promised land's divided, and they've lost all of their territory to the Babylonians, which lose it to the Persians, which lose it eventually to Rome, gets everything in about AD 60. BC 60. Rome takes over everything. So at that point right there, BC 400, the land of Israel's gone. There's no more, right? They've been dispersed. So where am I going to? So when do we have a nation of Israel again? May 1948, right? What happened May 1948? Because we won the war, the Allies did, we decided these Jews need a country. Didn't we make that decision? That was made, right? These Jews need a country. They hadn't had one, boys, since 400 BC. They've just been scattered among the world, which they have. 1948, League of Nations, United Nations, whatever you want to call it, Allies set aside some land, and we're going to call this Israel. So here we are today. It's been almost 2,500 years since there'd been homeland, let's say, for the Jews. So we created them one. And you may have heard in just the last few weeks on TV, if you send $19, you can help one of these Jews in one of these foreign countries go back to Israel, to their native homeland, because they advertise it every Sunday afternoon. For $19, you can contribute money, and you can help bring a Jew back to the native land. So this story ends right here today, is the period of where they went so far off the map. God's patience had worn thin, and they had no reason for God to reach out to them again, evidently. They had exhausted his patience. Every one of these kings here were taken to Egypt, right? One spent his last days in Egypt, never to see us again, as they called it, their homeland, or Jerusalem again. Never. They never, ever, ever had a land of their own again. They were dispersed among the Babylonians. They were dispersed among the Assyrians. And who are the Assyrians? Yep. They were from the areas we call today Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria. They were, and that's the Assyrians. They were dispersed there. They were dispersed real heavily. That's the reason that when we get to the New Testament, it's the call from to come back to Jerusalem. Because first the message went to the Jews, did it not? All of the apostles were vessels to go to the Jews, except one. Right? Which one? Paul, right? Paul was the one to go to the Gentiles. He started out with it. Yeah, he got fed up with them faster than any, because you would have thought he was the most devout Jew.
Yeah, he was a Jew of the Jews.
Yeah, was always. He grew up a Hebrew. He was proud to even tell them that, and he, like he said, he did everything with good conscience. So he was dedicated. But all of the other apostles we read about, these guys were Jews, devout Jews also, who had a little bit more trouble accepting the Gentiles than Paul did. But Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. So when we actually turn the page from Zedekiah, and if we flip through 400 years of cultural dark ages, and by the way, this is things that because I got to read into that gap period there. The Jews had even taken on most all of the cultural, religious gods of the Romans during the Dark Ages. The Olympic Games, which the Romans were heavy into, the Egyptians adopted, the Jewish nations adopted that. Even in some pockets it says of Jewish societies that tried to exist in the Roman period, they would have pockets where they still tried to celebrate and honor the Torah, but they would take on cultural changes just like the Greeks and the Romans did, even to the extent of Olympic Games, even to the extent of competing in the nude. For instance, that's the Romans and the Olympics, the athletes competed in the nude, and the Jews even started doing that. Even, and so much they took on to where it was hard to, even at some periods, to tell where a Jew was and where a Greek or a Roman was. So all of that has started happening in these kings right here. These four kings here have adopted. If you go back and read Josephus, which I read a good bit about Josephus stuff, and he's pretty extensive on these four kings, because obviously they're the closest ones to the historical data that he's writing about. But these 4 kings, every one of them adapted more and more to the surrounding cultures of the people that they were with. If they were taken by the Egyptians, they began to worship Egyptian gods. If they were taken by the Babylonians, it was Maruk, their god, they worshiped, even to the point of putting altars to them inside some of their Jewish temples. They went so far off, and each one of these kings got progressively further away. And as we read this, if you read the lesson today, you just continuously read very short narratives about each one of them's reign. But you never ever saw anything in there where one of the reigns even attempted to get back. In the others, even Manasseh, as bad as he was, how did it end?
Well, he ended by, well, first of all, he was taken off with a hook in his nose and
Right.
got his attention. And when he came back, before he came back, he repented.
Right.
So and God, and of course, but it's that so ironic, I think, that it was because of, he was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Right.
With God. God, the excesses of Manasseh just did it for him.
Yep.
And by the way, speaking of God's patience, 55 years, 5 years God put up with him.
Yeah. Just on and on.
On and on.
Yeah.
But then he forgave.
Yeah.
At least he
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Even as bad as he was. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Long suffering. I mean, we have so many examples in these kings of how long suffering, patient God is. And we decided we got the same God today. We got the same God. Praise be God. Yes, like Jim said. Because how many of us mess up? How many times do we mess up the same thing over and over again? But he's faithful to forgive if we repent. Manasseh, as bad as he was, the things he did, he repented, and God didn't let none of these bad things happen while he was living. God held it back. I guess he held it back for 4 more deserving guys, because they got to see it, and feel it. But, this is the same God. He don't change. And that's good that we see all of these things. They had 70 years. They knew that this Babylonian thing, if they had faith, they knew it was going to last 70 years. They've been told 70 years it's going to be over. We're not told because eternity is going to be forever. We're not given 70-year sentence. We're given a eternity sentence if we don't do right. So we have a God who's forgiving, all of this. But there's always that fear of he's a just God. That's the thing that we have to always realize. We see all the good. We see how good he is good. And you hear all this thing this day and time. I don't believe a God as good as he is, that God could ever condemn anybody. They've never read the Old Testament. They've never read the Old Testament. Because you can see that he is tolerant, he is patient, he is loving, but above all, he is just. And he will not tolerate sin long. I think that the lessons we have out of these kings is a study in more in human nature, because in them we see some of our weaknesses. We get influenced by people around us if we're not careful. The world has a draw to us. It pulls on us. Yet, we have to have the strength. Do we have prophets to beat us up and keep us straight? have the Word. And if we stay in the Word, that'll keep us on the right path. These kings got off the path, never could find the road, and lost everything. These four being the last four that lost the nationality of Jewish Israel forever. It's a lesson to us that I feel like we understand that He is a repentant God. We are repentant people. He'll be a forgiving God. However, we have to make that first step. These guys, some did, some didn't. Some lived a great life. We see all kinds of lives that's been led by these 14 kings that we studied this quarter. However, we see the results if we don't. It's been a good lessons. I've enjoyed them. They're history lessons. Next quarter, it's a whole different game. It's going to be some interesting studies. Particularly, I'm interested in waiting for number 7. And I'm so thankful that Brother Jim Hooper will be teaching that. It's called The Indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And we want y'all to all be really up to date. You got 6 weeks now to get ready for that. We want Jim to explain the indwelling of the Spirit. I was looking and I was hoping when he divides up, Jim divides up who teaches what. And I saw that topic and I was saying, oh Lord, I hope that ain't mine. I hope it ain't mine. It is. But there's some interesting and it's foundational truths is what it is. And it's gonna be some great studies. And I would hope that these studies these have been historical studies. It's not an opinion-based study. These haven't been. They're factuals. There's more facts, but there is more, let's say, interpretational differences in this next studies. There's more topics that could possibly you may have a little bit different take on that subject than someone else. I would hope that we could study those and have a little bit more participation because these topics give themselves more to discussion format than this does. These lessons here are just, to me, are just historical stories. But appreciate your patience, putting up with me. Enjoyed the lesson, and we'll look forward to our worship together in a few minutes.